Elon Musk saves boy from street bullies. What happens next is incredible. The mid-afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement of the bustling street. School had just let out, and the sidewalks were alive with students spilling out of the nearby middle school, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Among the throng of kids, a young boy named Oliver stood out. Not because of anything he said or did, but because of how he was trying to disappear into the crowd. His slight frame and oversized backpack gave him the appearance of someone trying to carry more weight than he could handle, both literally and figuratively. Oliver's head was down, his shaggy brown hair falling into his eyes as he clutched the straps of his backpack tightly. He weaved through the crowd with a practiced precision, avoiding eye contact and muttering apologies whenever he accidentally brushed against someone. But no matter how carefully he moved, Oliver couldn't shake the presence behind him. The low, taunting laughs followed him like a shadow, each chuckle cutting through the ambient noise like a knife. "Hey Oliver, where you off to in such a hurry?" A voice called out mockingly from a few feet away. Oliver's stomach tightened. He didn't need to look back to know who it was. The voice belonged to Cody, a stocky 8th grader who had made it his personal mission to make Oliver's life miserable. Cody wasn't alone, he rarely was. His two sidekicks, Marcus and Ethan, flanked him on either side, their sneers matching their leaders. Oliver quickened his pace, his sneakers slapping against the pavement as he darted toward the quieter side of the street. But his efforts were futile. Cody and his gang had spotted him the moment he left the school gates, and they weren't about to let him go without a confrontation. "Hey, we're talking to you," Cody shouted, his voice taking on an edge of irritation. Oliver gritted his teeth, his heart pounding as he turned into an alleyway in a desperate attempt to lose them. The alley was narrow and lined with dumpsters, the smell of old garbage making him gag. He had taken this route before, and it had always been his quickest escape. But today his plan backfired. "Gotcha!" Cody yelled triumphantly as he rounded the corner with Marcus and Ethan close behind. They blocked the exit, their smug expressions sending a jolt of fear through Oliver's chest. "Leave me alone," Oliver said, his voice shaking but defiant. Cody smirked, crossing his arms. "What's the rush, little guy? We just want to chat." Marcus and Ethan snickered, their laughter echoing off the alley walls. Oliver clenched his fists, his eyes darting around for an escape route, but there was none. He was trapped. Cody continued, taking a step closer. "You've been real good at avoiding us lately, but we don't like being ignored. It's rude." Oliver backed up until his shoulders hit the cold brick wall. "I didn't do anything to you. That's the problem," Marcus chimed in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think you're better than us or something?" Before Oliver could respond, Cody lunged forward, grabbing the front of his backpack and yanking it off his shoulders. Oliver stumbled, his balance thrown off as Cody tossed the backpack to Ethan. "Let's see what we've got in here," Ethan said with a grin, unzipping the bag and dumping its contents onto the ground. Textbooks, notebooks, and a brown paper lunch bag spilled out, scattering across the dirty pavement. "Give it back," Oliver shouted, his voice cracking. Cody laughed, stepping on one of the notebooks. "Or what? You gonna fight us?" The scene wasn't entirely unnoticed. A few pedestrians had glanced down the alley but quickly looked away, not wanting to get involved. It was a bustling street, but people had a way of turning a blind eye when things got uncomfortable. Except for one man. Standing just across the street, Elon Musk had been walking back to his parked car when the commotion caught his attention. He paused, his gaze narrowing as he took in the scene unfolding in the alley. The bullies' mocking laughter, the boys' desperate protests. It didn't sit right with him. Elon wasn't dressed in anything that would make him stand out, just a plain gray t-shirt and dark jeans. To anyone passing by, he looked like any other pedestrian. But his sharp eyes and quick mind were anything but ordinary. He hesitated for only a moment before stepping toward the alley, his movements purposeful but unhurried. Elon wasn't the type to rush into things without assessing the situation first. As he approached, he heard Cody's voice again, taunting and cruel. "What's this?" Cody said, holding up the brown paper bag that had fallen out of Oliver's backpack. He shook it, the sound of a sandwich wrapper crinkling inside. "Your mom packed this for you?" Oliver lunged forward, trying to grab the bag, but Cody shoved him back easily. Oliver stumbled, barely catching himself before he fell. Elon's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Hey!" The bullies froze, their heads snapping toward the source of the interruption. Elon stood at the mouth of the alley, his hands in his pockets and an unreadable expression on his face. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Cody sneered, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "None of your business, old man." Elon raised an eyebrow, taking a step closer. "It became my business when you started picking on someone half your size." Ethan shifted nervously, glancing at Cody for direction. Cody, however, wasn't ready to back down. "Look, we're just having a little fun. Why don't you mind your own?" Elon's gaze flicked to Oliver, who was clutching his side and breathing heavily. Then he looked back at Cody, his expression hardening. "I don't think the kid's laughing." The tension in the alley shifted, the bullies exchanging uneasy glances. Elon didn't raise his voice or make any sudden moves, but there was something in his demeanor that made it clear he wasn't going anywhere. "Leave the kid alone," Elon said, his voice quiet but firm. "Now?" Oliver, still clutching his side, glanced nervously between Elon and the bullies. His chest heaved as he tried to steady his breathing, and his mind raced with a mix of hope and fear. Help had arrived, but would it be enough? Cody broke the silence first, taking a step forward and puffing out his chest in a poor attempt to appear intimidating. "Look, old man," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "We don't need some random dude telling us what to do." Elon remained calm, his hands still in his pockets. "It doesn't look like you need much of anything," he said evenly, his gaze flicking to the contents of Oliver's spilled backpack. "Except maybe a lesson in basic decency." Marcus let out a bark of laughter, though it sounded forced. "You've got a smart mouth for someone walking into other people's business." Ethan chimed in, his voice full of mockery. "Yeah, maybe we should teach you a lesson, huh?" Oliver's eyes widened in panic, and he opened his mouth to warn Elon to leave, but the words wouldn't come. His legs felt like lead, his fear rooting him to the spot. Cody turned to Marcus and Ethan, smirking as though Elon's calm demeanor was some kind of invitation. "What do you guys think? Should we show him how we handle nosy people?" Elon raised an eyebrow, tilting his head slightly. "Interesting approach. But let me ask you something. What exactly are you trying to prove here?" Cody's smirk faltered for a split second, but he quickly recovered. "Prove? I don't have to prove anything. You're the one sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." "Am I?" Elon asked, taking a single step closer. The movement was subtle, but it shifted the balance of the standoff. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying very hard to prove something. To yourselves, maybe, or to each other. That you're tough, that you're in control. But all I see are 3 kids picking on someone who can't fight back." The words hit their mark, and for a brief moment, the bullies exchanged uncertain glances. But Cody wasn't ready to back down. His pride was on the line, and he wasn't about to let some stranger make him look weak. "Big talk coming from some guy who doesn't even know us," Cody shot back, his voice rising. "Maybe you should think twice before opening your mouth." Marcus and Ethan laughed nervously, clearly emboldened by Cody's defiance. Marcus picked up Oliver's lunch bag from the ground and held it up, his grin widening. "Hey, look at this. What do you think's in here? PB&J? Tuna? Give it back!" Oliver shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Make me," Marcus taunted, holding the bag just out of reach. "Oh, wait. You can't." Ethan grabbed one of Oliver's notebooks, flipping through the pages before tearing out a handful. "Wow, look at this handwriting. What are you, a 3rd grader?" Oliver's face turned red, his fists clenching at his sides. He wanted to fight back, but he knew it was pointless. He was outnumbered, and the bullies were bigger and stronger. His only hope was the stranger standing in front of him. Elon's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly as he watched Marcus and Ethan's antics. You're really committed to this act, aren't you? He said, his voice calm but laced with quiet authority. Is this what you do for fun? Tear people down because it makes you feel bigger? Cody took another step forward, his smirk hardening into a scowl. You don't know anything about us. Maybe not, Elon admitted. But I know enough. I know that real strength doesn't come from intimidation or cruelty. It comes from knowing when to walk away. Cody laughed bitterly, shaking his head. You think you're some kind of hero? Newsflash, old man. This isn't your fight. So why don't you take your little speech and go back to wherever you came from? Elon tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. I'll leave when you do. Cody's scowl deepened, and for a moment, it seemed like he might actually lash out. But then his eyes lit up with a new idea, and his smirk returned. Fine. You want to play the hero? Let's see how far that gets you. He turned to Ethan and nodded toward Oliver. Grab his bag. Ethan hesitated for a moment, glancing at Elon, but Cody's glare pushed him into action. He snatched Oliver's backpack off the ground and slung it over his shoulder, his smirk returning as he looked at Oliver. Come and get it. Oliver's face fell, his earlier hope replaced by a sinking sense of dread. He looked at Elon, his eyes pleading for help. Elon took a deep breath, his calm demeanor unshaken. You're making a mistake. Am I? Cody said, his tone mocking. What are you going to do about it? Call the cops? Go ahead. By the time they get here, we'll be long gone. Marcus laughed, tossing Oliver's lunch bag into the air and catching it. Yeah, maybe we'll even leave him something to remember us by. The bully's laughter echoed in the alley, cruel and hollow. Oliver felt his chest tighten, his fear threatening to overwhelm him. But then he noticed something in Elon's expression, a quiet determination that didn't waver, even in the face of their mockery. You're right about one thing, Elon said, his voice steady. This isn't my fight. This is. He nodded toward Oliver, who blinked in surprise. But if you think I'm going to stand by and watch while you try to break him down, you're sorely mistaken. The bully's laughter faltered, their confidence wavering as Elon's words sank in. For the first time, they seemed to realize that this wasn't going to end the way they'd planned. The laughter returned, louder and crueler, as Cody's smirk widened. He seemed to feed off the tension in the air, his confidence swelling with every second of Elon's calm defiance. Cody liked an audience, and the quiet authority Elon exuded only made him want to push harder. People like the stranger, quiet, unshaken, unassuming, always thought they could control situations with words. Cody was determined to prove otherwise. Looks like the old man thinks he's a philosopher, Cody jeered, pacing slowly in front of Elon like a predator circling its prey. You gonna give us a life lesson now? Tell us how to be better people. Ethan snickered, slinging Oliver's backpack higher onto his shoulder. Maybe he'll write a book about us. The brave little boy and the big, bad bullies. He tossed a glance at Marcus, who laughed on cue, his loud, forced cackle echoing off the brick walls. Oliver took a hesitant step forward, his small frame trembling but determined. Please, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Just give it back. Cody turned sharply, his eyes narrowing as he faced Oliver. Oh, you want it back, huh? He motioned for Ethan to hand him the backpack, which he held up high, just out of Oliver's reach. Come and get it, hero. Oliver hesitated, his fists clenching at his sides. He glanced at Elon, silently begging for guidance, but Elon remained still, his expression unreadable. Oliver's chest tightened. He felt trapped, cornered between his fear of the bullies and the faint hope that somehow, this stranger would step in. See, this is the problem, Cody continued, his voice dripping with mockery. You think the world owes you something just because you're small and pathetic. Newsflash, kid, it doesn't. Yeah, Marcus added, stepping closer to Oliver with a menacing grin. Maybe it's time someone taught you how the real world works. Elon shifted slightly, his calm demeanor unwavering as he took a deliberate step forward. The movement was subtle, but it instantly drew Cody's attention. Stay out of this, Cody snapped, his tone sharp, This has nothing to do with you. Elon raised an eyebrow, his hands still in his pockets. Doesn't it? Cody bristled, his temper flaring. What's your problem, man? Why do you even care? Elon's gaze didn't waver. Because someone should. The simplicity of the response seemed to rattle Cody, though he quickly masked his unease with more bravado. Yeah? Well, maybe someone should have told you to mind your own business. Ethan chimed in, laughing nervously. You hear that, old man? Cody's trying to do you a favor. Elon's lips twitched, almost as if he were suppressing a smile. I'll keep that in mind. Cody's fists clenched at his sides, his frustration bubbling to the surface. You think this is funny? Huh? You think you're better than us? Elon tilted his head slightly. Do you? The question hung in the air, heavy and pointed. Cody's smirk faltered for a split second, the confidence in his eyes replaced by something darker. Anger, embarrassment, maybe even doubt. But he recovered quickly, his jaw tightening as he turned back to Oliver. Fine, Cody said, his voice low and menacing. You want your stuff back? You're gonna have to work for it. He motioned for Marcus and Ethan to spread out, the two boys moving to flank Oliver like wolves surrounding their prey. Oliver's breath quickened, his wide eyes darting between the bullies as they closed in. Come on, kid, Marcus taunted, shoving Oliver lightly on the shoulder. Show us what you've got. Oliver stumbled but managed to stay on his feet. Stop it, he pleaded, his voice shaking. Or what? Ethan sneered, giving him another shove from the opposite side. You gonna cry? Run home to mommy? Elon's voice cut through the taunts like a blade. That's enough. The bullies froze, their heads snapping toward Elon. The calm authority in his tone carried more weight than any shout could have, and for a moment, they seemed unsure of how to respond. Cody was the first to recover, his scowl deepening. I told you to stay out of this, and I told you to leave him alone, Elon replied, his tone steady. He took another step forward, his presence filling the narrow alleyway. You don't want to push this any further. Cody laughed bitterly, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Oh yeah? And what are you going to do about it? Elon didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Oliver, his expression softening slightly. You okay, kid? Oliver nodded hesitantly, though his trembling hands betrayed his fear. Elon turned his attention back to Cody, his gaze sharp and unyielding. I'll say it one more time, walk away. Now! The tension in the alley was palpable, the air thick with unspoken challenges. Cody's pride was on the line, and he wasn't about to let some stranger make him look weak. But there was something in Elon's eyes, a quiet, unshakable confidence, that made even Cody hesitate. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Ethan. Maybe we should just go, man. Ethan frowned but didn't argue. Yeah, this guy's weird. Let's just leave. Cody shot them both a glare. You guys scared of some old dude? It's not about him, Marcus muttered, his voice barely audible. It's just, this isn't worth it. Cody ignored him, turning back to Elon with a defiant sneer. You think you've won? Huh? You think we're just gonna walk away? Elon didn't respond, his steady gaze speaking louder than words. The silence was deafening, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone in the alley. Finally, Cody shoved the backpack into Ethan's hands. Hold this, he snapped, his tone laced with frustration. He stepped toward Elon, his posture tense, as though daring him to make the first move. Elon remained still, his calm composure unshaken. You don't want to do this, he said quietly. Oh, I think I do, Cody shot back, his voice trembling slightly despite his bravado. The standoff stretched on, the tension in the air so thick it was almost suffocating. Oliver watched with wide eyes, his chest tightening as he realized just how far this was about to go. The alley seemed to shrink as Cody squared his shoulders, his eyes locked on Elon like a predator sizing up prey. The smirk on his face had twisted into something darker, a mask of determination, fueled by bravado and the need to prove himself. Behind him, Marcus and Ethan exchanged uneasy glances, but neither dared to speak up. Cody's pride had taken the wheel, and they knew better than to get in his way. You've got a lot of nerve, Cody said, his voice low and taut. Walking in here, acting like you're better than us, like you've got all the answers. Elon remained still, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. His calm demeanor didn't falter, even as Cody took another step closer. I'm not here to prove anything, Elon said evenly. I'm just standing up for what's right. Something you might want to try someday. Cody's jaw clenched, the words hitting a nerve. You don't know anything about me, he snapped. You don't get to judge me. I'm not judging you, Elon replied. I'm giving you a choice. Walk away now, and this ends here. For a moment, it looked like Cody might actually consider it. But then Marcus let out a nervous laugh, and Ethan muttered something under his breath. Something about backing down. The flicker of doubt in Cody's eyes was snuffed out instantly, replaced by a hardened glare. He turned to Oliver, who was still pressed against the wall. His small frame trembling, but his eyes locked on Elon with a mix of fear and hope. Cody sneered. You're lucky your babysitter showed up, he said, pointing a finger at Oliver. Otherwise, we'd be having a very different conversation. Oliver flinched, his hands balling into fists at his sides. He wanted to say something, to fight back, but the words wouldn't come. Every time he opened his mouth, the weight of fear choked him into silence. Cody's attention shifted back to Elon. You think you're some kind of hero? He asked, his voice rising. Coming in here, sticking your nose where it doesn't belong? You don't know what you're messing with. Elon's gaze didn't waver. Enlighten me. Cody's smirk returned, and he motioned for Marcus to hand him Oliver's backpack. Marcus hesitated, but a sharp look from Cody was all it took to get him moving. He tossed the bag to Cody, who caught it with one hand and held it up triumphantly. This is what's wrong with people like you, Cody said, shaking the bag for emphasis. Always stepping in to save the day, acting like you're better than everyone else. But you're not better. You're just a guy who doesn't know when to quit. He unzipped the backpack and began rifling through its contents, pulling out books, papers, and a worn pencil case. What's this, huh? Cody said, holding up a folder covered in stickers. Your homework? Some big science project? Stop, Oliver pleaded, his voice cracking. Please just give it back. Cody ignored him, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from the folder and holding it up for everyone to see. What's this? He asked, squinting at the paper. Report card? Let's see how smart you really are. Ethan leaned over Cody's shoulder, his grin widening as he read the grades aloud. C in math, B in science. Oh, look at this D in gym. Guess you're not much of an athlete, huh? Marcus laughed, shoving Oliver lightly. No wonder you're such a loser. Can't even pass gym class. Tears welled in Oliver's eyes, but he blinked them back, his fists trembling at his sides. He wanted to scream, to lunge at Cody and take his backpack back by force, but the weight of fear and helplessness held him back. Elon's voice broke through the laughter, calm but firm. That's enough. The bullies turned to him, their sneers faltering slightly at the quiet authority in his tone. But Cody wasn't ready to back down. He stepped closer to Elon, holding the crumpled report card like a trophy. Or what? Cody asked, his voice dripping with defiance. You gonna call the cops? Go ahead. I dare you. Elon didn't flinch. I don't need to call the cops. I'm giving you one last chance to walk away. Cody laughed bitterly, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? This is our turf. We make the rules here. And you? He jabbed a finger at Elon's chest. You don't belong. Ethan and Marcus seemed to draw courage from Cody's words, stepping closer to Oliver with menacing grins. Marcus grabbed one of Oliver's notebooks from the ground and flipped it open, tearing out a handful of pages. Oops, he said mockingly. Didn't mean to do that. Ethan picked up a math textbook and tossed it to Cody. Think this'll make him cry? Cody caught the book and held it up like a prize, his smirk widening. Let's find out. Oliver's breath hitched as Cody raised the book above his head, poised to slam it onto the ground. No! Oliver shouted, his voice cracking. Before Cody could bring the book down, Elon took a step forward, his movements deliberate but calm. Enough, he said again, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. Cody hesitated, the weight of Elon's presence giving him pause. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. "You're not gonna do anything," Cody said, his voice trembling slightly despite his bravado. "You're just talk." Elon's eyes narrowed slightly, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Try me." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a moment, it seemed like the tension might break, that Cody might finally back down. But then Marcus muttered something under his breath. Something about not letting some old guy tell them what to do, and Cody's resolve hardened. He tossed the book to the ground with a loud thud, his smirk returning as he turned to Oliver. "Looks like your friend here isn't as tough as he thinks." The heavy thud of the math textbook hitting the ground reverberated through the narrow alley. Oliver flinched at the sound, his heart pounding in his chest as Cody's laugh rang out, loud and mocking. Ethan and Marcus joined in, their jeers echoing off the brick walls like a cruel symphony. Elon remained where he was, his expression calm but his gaze sharp, watching the scene unfold with quiet intensity. "You see that?" Cody said, his voice dripping with mockery as he motioned to the discarded textbook. "That's what happens when you don't know your place." Oliver bit his lip, his fists clenching at his sides. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but the lump in his throat made it impossible. Instead, he glanced at Elon, his eyes silently pleading for help. Elon met his gaze briefly, offering a small, almost imperceptible nod before turning his attention back to Cody. "That's enough," Elon said, his tone steady but firm. Cody's laughter died down, replaced by a sneer as he turned to face Elon. "You keep saying that," he said, his voice rising, "but you're not doing anything. You're just standing there, running your mouth." Ethan and Marcus exchanged uneasy glances, but neither said anything. They were content to let Cody take the lead, their loyalty to him outweighing their growing discomfort with the situation. Elon tilted his head slightly, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Sometimes, standing up to people like you is enough." Cody's sneer deepened, his pride clearly stung by the comment. "People like me?" he repeated, stepping closer to Elon. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Elon didn't flinch, his gaze unwavering. "It means you use fear and intimidation to feel powerful. But real power doesn't come from making others feel small." Cody's face twisted with anger, the weight of Elon's words hitting a nerve. "You don't know anything about me," he snapped. "You don't know what I've been through, and you don't know anything about him," Elon replied, nodding toward Oliver. "But that hasn't stopped you from making his life miserable." For a moment, the tension hung heavy in the air, neither side willing to back down. Cody's fists clenched at his sides, his body language radiating anger and frustration. Ethan and Marcus shifted uncomfortably, their earlier bravado starting to waver under the weight of the confrontation. "You think you're some kind of saint, don't you?" Cody said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Coming in here acting all high and mighty, but you're just like everyone else. Full of talk and nothing to back it up." Elon raised an eyebrow, his expression calm. "You think I'm full of talk?" Cody smirked, taking another step closer. "Yeah, I do. You're just another guy who thinks he can fix everything with a speech." Elon took a slow, deliberate step forward, closing the distance between them. His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it that made even Cody pause. "If that's what you think, then maybe you're not paying attention." Cody's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered, turning his attention back to Oliver. "You hear that, kid?" he said, his tone mocking. "Your little guardian angel thinks he's tough." Oliver didn't respond, his wide eyes locked on Cody as he took another step toward him. Ethan and Marcus followed suit, their movements hesitant but menacing. Oliver pressed himself against the wall, his small frame trembling as the bullies closed in around him. Ethan grabbed the pencil case from the pile of Oliver's belongings and held it up with a grin. "Hey, Cody, check this out," he said, unzipping the case and dumping its contents onto the ground. Pencils and erasers scattered across the dirty pavement, some rolling into the gutter. "Nice school supplies, nerd," Marcus said with a laugh, kicking one of the pencils into the gutter. Bet you spend all your time doing homework instead of having a life. Leave him alone, Elon said, his voice cutting through the laughter like a blade. Cody turned to face him, his eyes narrowing. Or what? Elon didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Oliver, who was trying desperately to gather his scattered belongings, while the bullies continued to taunt him. The sight was enough to make Elon's calm expression harden, a flicker of anger flashing in his eyes. You're not going to like the answer, Elon said finally, his voice low and steady. Cody's smirk returned, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. Big talk for someone who hasn't done anything but stand there. Ethan and Marcus laughed nervously, their confidence bolstered by Cody's defiance. Marcus picked up Oliver's lunch bag and held it up with a grin. Hey, Cody, want to see what's inside? Sure, Cody said, his smirk widening. Let's see what our little friend brought for lunch. Oliver's eyes widened in panic as Marcus tore open the bag, pulling out a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Peanut butter and jelly, Marcus said with a laugh, holding the sandwich up like it was some kind of trophy. Classic. Give it back, Oliver shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. Or what? Marcus taunted, taking a bite out of the sandwich. He chewed dramatically, his smirk widening as he swallowed. Delicious. Oliver's face turned red, tears welling in his eyes as he watched Marcus toss the half-eaten sandwich onto the ground. You're pathetic, Marcus said, his voice dripping with disdain. No wonder nobody likes you. Enough, Elon said, his voice sharper this time. The bullies froze, their laughter dying down as they turned to face him. Elon's calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a steely resolve that made even Cody hesitate. You've made your point, Elon said, his tone icy. Now it's time to stop. Cody hesitated, his bravado cracking under the weight of Elon's words. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. You don't get to tell us what to do, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Elon took another step forward, his gaze locked on Cody. Maybe not, he said quietly, but someone needs to. From where Oliver sat on the ground, frantically trying to gather his scattered belongings, he could feel the shift in energy. The bullies weren't just targeting him anymore. Elon had drawn their attention, and that terrified Oliver more than anything. He didn't want to see this man, this stranger who had stood up for him, get hurt because of him. But Elon didn't seem fazed. He remained calm, his hands in his pockets as he watched Cody with an expression that was both curious and calculating. What's your endgame here? Elon asked, his tone casual but pointed. Cody blinked, caught off guard by the question. What? You heard me, Elon said, tilting his head slightly. What's the plan? Keep pushing until someone gets hurt? Or are you just trying to see how far you can go before you realize you've already lost? Ethan snorted, though there was a nervous edge to his laughter. You talk like you're the one in charge here. Elon's gaze flicked to Ethan briefly before returning to Cody. I'm not, but neither are you. Cody's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. He hated how calm this man was, how unbothered he seemed by the growing tension. It made Cody feel small, insignificant, and he couldn't stand it. You don't know anything about me, he spat. So stop pretending like you do. Maybe I don't know you, Elon replied, his voice steady. But I've seen enough to know that you're better than this. Cody laughed bitterly, shaking his head. Better than what? Standing up for myself? Showing the world I'm not someone to mess with? Is that what this is? Elon asked, his tone almost conversational. Because from where I'm standing, it looks more like you're trying to convince yourself. The words hit their mark, and for a moment, Cody's bravado faltered. But he quickly masked his uncertainty with a sharp glare, motioning for Marcus and Ethan to back him up. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice rising. And you're not going to stand there and lecture me like I'm some kind of kid. Marcus stepped forward, his unease replaced by a forced confidence. Yeah, who do you think you are, anyway? You're just some random dude who doesn't know when to mind his own business. Ethan nodded, though his movements were hesitant. You think you're better than us? Don't you? Just 'cause you talk fancy and stand there like you own the place, Elon didn't respond right away. Instead, he glanced at Oliver, who was still crouched on the ground, clutching the few items he'd managed to gather. The boy's wide eyes were filled with fear, but there was something else there too, hope. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to keep Elon standing his ground. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Elon said finally, his voice calm. "But I do think you're wasting your energy on something that won't make you happy." Cody let out a sharp laugh, his frustration bubbling over. "Happy? What are you, a therapist now? You think saying some big words is gonna fix anything?" "It's not about fixing," Elon said. "It's about understanding. And right now, you're too busy trying to prove something to see what's really going on." Cody's face twisted with anger, the weight of Elon's words cutting deeper than he wanted to admit. He turned to Oliver, his voice rising as he pointed an accusatory finger. "This is your fault, you know that? If you just kept your head down and stayed out of our way, none of this would have happened." Oliver flinched, his small frame trembling as Cody loomed over him. "I didn't do anything," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Exactly," Cody sneered. "You didn't do anything. You're just some pathetic little kid who thinks the world owes you something." Ethan and Marcus laughed, their earlier unease replaced by a renewed sense of loyalty to Cody. Marcus picked up Oliver's crumpled report card and waved it in the air. "Yeah, look at this. You can't even pass gym class, and you think you're gonna stand up to us." Oliver's cheeks burned with shame, tears welling in his eyes as the bully's laughter grew louder. He wanted to disappear, to shrink into the ground and never have to face them again. But then he saw Elon take another step forward, his calm presence a quiet but powerful reminder that he wasn't alone. "That's enough," Elon said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The bullies turned to him, their laughter dying down as they registered the steel in his tone. But Cody wasn't ready to back down. His pride wouldn't let him. "Or what?" he demanded, his voice trembling slightly despite his best efforts to sound tough. "You think you're gonna scare us off? You don't know who you're messing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Elon said, his gaze unwavering. "Three kids who think tearing someone else down will make them feel bigger. But it won't. It never does." Cody's fists clenched at his sides, his body taut with frustration. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Like you've got it all figured out." Elon shrugged slightly. "I've figured out enough to know that this isn't the answer." Cody took another step forward, his face inches from Elon's. "You don't know anything about me," he said through gritted teeth. "And you don't get to tell me what to do." Elon met his gaze calmly, his voice steady. "You're right. I don't. But I can tell you this. The path you're on doesn't lead anywhere good. And the longer you stay on it, the harder it'll be to turn back." The silence that followed was heavy, the weight of Elon's words pressing down on everyone in the alley. Even Ethan and Marcus seemed unsure of what to do, their earlier confidence replaced by a growing sense of unease. But Cody refused to let it show. He couldn't afford to, not in front of his friends, and certainly not in front of the small crowd that had gathered to watch the standoff. "Let's see how tough you really are," Cody said, his voice rising as he turned to his friends. "Grab the kid." Oliver's eyes widened in panic as Marcus and Ethan moved toward him, their hesitation replaced by a grim determination. But before they could reach him, Elon stepped forward, his calm composure unshaken as he positioned himself between the bullies and the boy. "That's not going to happen," Elon said, his voice quiet but firm. The tension in the alley reached a breaking point, the air thick with unspoken challenges. Cody's smirk faltered, his confidence wavering as he realized that this man wasn't going to back down. But his pride wouldn't let him walk away, not yet. "Grab the kid," Cody repeated, his voice louder this time, as though the force of his words alone could banish the creeping doubt in his mind. Marcus and Ethan hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. They were used to following Cody's lead, but Elon's quiet confidence was shaking something in them, making them question whether this was the fight they wanted to pick. "What are you waiting for?" Cody snapped, his frustration bubbling over. "Do it!" Marcus swallowed hard but stepped forward, grabbing Oliver by the arm and yanking him to his feet. Oliver let out a small yelp, his face contorting with pain as Marcus tightened his grip. "Let go of me," Oliver shouted, his voice trembling. "Shut up," Marcus muttered, though there was a flicker of guilt in his eyes as he glanced at the boy. "Just stay still, okay?" Ethan stepped closer, his movements hesitant. "Cody, maybe we should what?" Cody interrupted, rounding on him with a glare. "You getting cold feet now?" Ethan flinched but didn't respond, his shoulders hunching under the weight of Cody's anger. He glanced at Elon, who hadn't moved, his expression as calm as ever. It was unnerving how still the man was, like he knew something they didn't, like he was waiting for the right moment to strike. "You're wasting your time," Elon said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "This isn't going to end the way you think it will." Cody let out a sharp laugh, though it sounded hollow. "You keep saying that, but you're the one just standing there. You're not gonna do anything." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you think?" Cody's smirk wavered, but he quickly recovered, grabbing Oliver's backpack from the ground and holding it up. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Like you've got everything figured out. But you don't know anything about us." "I know enough," Elon said simply. "I know you're better than this." The words hit like a punch, and for a moment, Cody's mask slipped. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he took a step closer to Elon. "Don't you dare talk to me like you know me," he spat. "You think you're better than me just because you wear a stupid t-shirt and talk like some big shot?" Elon didn't flinch. "This isn't about me." "Oh, it's about you now," Cody said, his voice rising. "You made it about you the second you decided to stick your nose where it doesn't belong." Marcus tightened his grip on Oliver's arm, his knuckles turning white. Oliver winced, struggling against the hold, but Marcus didn't let go. Ethan hovered nearby, his movements uncertain, like he was caught between loyalty to Cody and his own growing unease. "Let the kid go," Elon said, his tone calm but firm. "Or what?" Cody shot back, his smirk returning. "You're not gonna stop us." Elon took a slow step forward, his hands still in his pockets. "Are you sure about that?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Cody hesitated, his bravado cracking under the weight of Elon's gaze. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. Not in front of his friends. Not in front of the growing crowd of onlookers. "Yeah, I'm sure," Cody said, though his voice trembled slightly. "You're just a guy. You don't scare me." Elon's lips twitched, almost as if he were suppressing a smile. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to help you." "Help me?" Cody repeated, his tone incredulous. "You think I need your help?" "I think everyone needs help sometimes," Elon said. "Even you." The words landed harder than Cody wanted to admit. For a split second, his mind flashed to memories he'd buried long ago. Memories of being the one on the ground, the one with the torn backpack and the bruises. But he shoved the thoughts aside, replacing them with anger. "I don't need anything from you," Cody said through gritted teeth. "And neither does he." He pointed to Oliver, who was still struggling in Marcus's grip. Elon's gaze flicked to Marcus. "Let him go." Marcus hesitated, his grip loosening slightly as he glanced at Cody. "Maybe we should." "Don't," Cody snapped, his voice sharp. "Don't even think about it." Marcus froze, his hand still on Oliver's arm. But the uncertainty in his eyes was unmistakable. He wasn't as sure of himself as Cody was, or at least as Cody pretended to be. Ethan shifted nervously, glancing between Cody and Elon. "Cody, come on," he said quietly. "This is getting out of hand." "It's not out of hand," Cody shouted, his voice echoing off the alley walls. "I'm in control here." Elon tilted his head slightly. "Are you?" The question hit harder than it should have, and Cody's face flushed with anger. "Shut up," he muttered, his voice low but venomous. Elon didn't respond, his calm gaze never wavering. It was infuriating how composed he was, how unbothered he seemed by the chaos around him. Cody hated it. He hated how this man made him feel, small, insignificant, powerless. "Fine," Cody said, his voice rising. "You want to see what I can do? Watch this." He turned to Marcus, Hold him still. Marcus hesitated, his grip faltering. Cody, I don't think... Do it, Cody barked, his tone leaving no room for argument. Marcus tightened his grip on Oliver, who let out a small whimper as he struggled against the hold. Cody reached down, grabbing one of Oliver's scattered notebooks from the ground. He flipped it open, scanning the pages before tearing out a handful of paper and tossing them into the air. Oops, Cody said with a smirk. Guess you'll have to rewrite that. The bullies laughed, their jeers echoing through the alley. But their laughter felt forced now, hollow and uneasy. Even Ethan's grin had faded, replaced by a nervous frown as he watched the scene unfold. Elon didn't move, his calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos around him. You're only making things worse for yourself, he said quietly. Cody ignored him, grabbing another notebook and ripping out more pages. You think I care? He shouted, his voice cracking. You think any of this matters? It matters to him, Elon said, nodding toward Oliver. And whether you want to admit it or not, it matters to you too. Cody froze, the words hitting him harder than he expected. For a moment, he looked like he might actually listen. But then he shook his head, his jaw tightening as he turned away. You don't know anything, he muttered, more to himself than to Elon. The laughter echoed hollowly in the alley, sharp and jagged against the oppressive silence that hung between each of Cody's movements. He tore another page from one of Oliver's notebooks, crumpling it into a ball and tossing it into the gutter. The sound of the paper landing with a soft, wet plop made Oliver flinch, his trembling hands hovering uselessly over the scattered remnants of his belongings. Cody glanced at Oliver, his smirk widening. What's the matter, kid? You gonna cry? Go ahead. Might as well give us a show. Marcus chuckled nervously, though the sound was strained. He still held Oliver's arm, but his grip had loosened slightly, as if he wasn't entirely committed to the act anymore. Ethan shifted uneasily behind Cody, his earlier bravado replaced by an unspoken question. How far were they willing to go? Elon remained where he was, standing just a few feet away, his calm gaze fixed on Cody. His hands were still in his pockets, his posture relaxed, but there was a tension in his presence. A quiet, unspoken challenge that made even the most fleeting glances toward him feel like a dare. You think this is funny? Elon asked, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Cody's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. I think it's hilarious, he said, his tone rising. What are you gonna do about it? Call the cops? Go ahead. I'd love to see you try. Ethan's nervous laugh broke the silence. Yeah, good luck with that. By the time anyone shows up, we'll be long gone. Marcus didn't laugh this time. He glanced at Oliver, his grip loosening further, but a sharp glare from Cody stopped him in his tracks. Hold him, Cody snapped. Don't make me say it again. Elon tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. You've got them scared, he said, his voice calm but deliberate. Not him, your friends. Look at them. They're not laughing anymore. Cody turned sharply, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Marcus and Ethan. Both boys froze under his glare, their unease written plainly across their faces. But they said nothing, their silence giving Cody the confidence to press on. They're not scared, Cody said, his voice rising. They're just smart enough to know who's in charge. Elon raised an eyebrow. Are you? The question hit harder than Cody expected, and his jaw tightened as he turned back to face Elon. You don't get to talk to me like that, he spat. You think you're so tough standing there acting like you're better than us. But you're just another guy who doesn't know when to shut up. I've heard that before, Elon said, his tone even. Usually from people who are afraid of hearing the truth. Cody let out a sharp laugh, though it sounded forced. Truth? What truth? That you're some random guy sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. That you're better than this, Elon said simply. The words landed like a punch, and for a moment, Cody's bravado cracked. But he quickly recovered, grabbing another notebook from the pile and flipping it open. You think I care what you have to say? He said, tearing out a page and crumpling it in his fist. You don't know me. You don't know anything. Elon took a step forward, his movements deliberate but unthreatening. "I know you're angry," he said. "And I know that anger isn't going to get you what you want." Cody's smirk twisted into a sneer. "And what do you think I want, huh? You think I'm doing this because I care about some stupid kid and his stupid stuff?" Elon didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Oliver, who was still crouched on the ground. His wide eyes filled with fear. Then he looked back at Cody, his gaze steady. "I think you're doing this because it's easier than dealing with what's really bothering you." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Marcus and Ethan seemed taken aback by the statement, their uneasy glances darting between Cody and Elon. But Cody's pride wouldn't let him back down. He clenched his fists, his face flushing with anger as he took a step toward Elon. "You don't know anything about me," Cody said through gritted teeth. "And you don't get to tell me what to do." Elon didn't flinch. "You're right, I don't. But I can tell you this. Whatever you're running from, it's not going to go away by hurting people who've done nothing to you." Cody let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You think this is about me? You think I care about some kid who can't even pass gym class?" "It's not about him," Elon said quietly. "It's about you." The words hit harder than Cody wanted to admit, and his hands trembled as he clenched them into fists. He hated how calm this man was, how unbothered he seemed by the chaos around him. It made Cody feel small, insignificant, and that only made him angrier. "Shut up," Cody muttered, his voice low but venomous. Elon's gaze didn't waver. "I'm not the enemy here." "Yeah," Cody shot back, his voice rising. "Then why don't you leave? Go back to wherever you came from and stop pretending like you care." "I care because someone has to," Elon said. The tension in the alley was suffocating, the weight of the confrontation pressing down on everyone. Oliver's small frame trembled as he watched, his fear mingling with a faint glimmer of hope. Marcus and Ethan shifted uncomfortably, their earlier confidence replaced by a growing sense of unease. And Cody stood at the center of it all, his bravado cracking under the weight of his own actions. But instead of backing down, Cody doubled down. He grabbed Oliver's pencil case from the ground, shaking it until the remaining contents spilled out. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" he said, glaring at Elon. "You think you've got all the answers." "I don't," Elon said simply. "But I know enough to see that this isn't who you are." Cody's laughter was sharp and bitter, cutting through the air like glass. "You don't know me," he said, "and you don't know what I've been through." "Then tell me," Elon said, his voice quiet but firm. "Tell me what's so bad that it makes this okay." Cody froze, his hands trembling as the weight of the question settled over him. For a moment, it looked like he might actually answer. But then he shook his head, his jaw tightening as he turned away. "You don't get it," Cody muttered. "You never will." The small crowd of onlookers at the edge of the alley had grown, their murmurs a low hum of curiosity and unease. The attention only seemed to fuel Cody, whose every movement now felt exaggerated, as though he were performing for an invisible spotlight. He thrived on being in control, on dictating the terms of every interaction. But this man standing before him was a puzzle he couldn't solve, a wall he couldn't break. And it infuriated him. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Cody sneered, pacing in slow, deliberate circles around Elon. His voice was louder now, aimed not just at his target but at the growing audience. "You think you can just walk in here and tell us how to live our lives?" Elon's hands stayed in his pockets, his calm gaze following Cody's every move. "I'm not here to tell you how to live," he said evenly. "I'm here to tell you that what you're doing is wrong." "Oh, it's wrong, is it?" Cody shot back, his tone mocking. "And who are you to decide that? Huh? Who made you the judge?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting toward Marcus, who looked just as uneasy. The two of them had stopped laughing entirely, their earlier bravado replaced by a nervous energy that seemed to cling to them like a second skin. Even they could feel it now, the slow, inevitable unraveling of Cody's control. Oliver sat huddled against the wall, clutching the tattered remnants of his belongings. His wide eyes flicked between Cody and Elon, his fear mingling with a faint but growing sense of hope. He didn't understand why this man had stepped in, why he hadn't walked away like everyone else would have. But for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely alone. Cody's pacing came to an abrupt stop, his eyes narrowing as he turned to Marcus. "Hold the kid tighter," he barked, his voice sharp and commanding. Marcus hesitated, glancing at Oliver before looking back at Cody. "I didn't ask what you think," Cody snapped, cutting him off. "Do it," Marcus sighed, his shoulders slumping as he tightened his grip on Oliver's arm. Oliver winced, his small frame trembling as he tried to pull away, but Marcus held firm. "Stop squirming," Marcus muttered, though his voice lacked the conviction it had earlier. "You're scared," Elon said, his voice calm but firm. The statement wasn't directed at Marcus. It was aimed squarely at Cody. Cody's head snapped around, his eyes blazing with fury. "What did you say?" "I said you're scared," Elon repeated, his tone unwavering. "Not of me, not even of him." He nodded toward Oliver. "You're scared of yourself?" The words hit like a punch, and for a moment, Cody's bravado faltered. But he quickly recovered, his face twisting into a sneer. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Elon said. "I know that the angrier you get, the more you're trying to hide. From them," he gestured to Marcus and Ethan. "From yourself?" Ethan took a small step back, his unease evident in the way he avoided meeting Cody's gaze. "Cody, maybe we should just, leave. This isn't worth it." "It's worth it to me," Cody snapped, rounding on him. "What's your problem, huh? You getting soft on me now?" Ethan didn't respond, his gaze dropping to the ground. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his grip on Oliver loosening slightly as he glanced between Cody and Elon. The cracks in their unity were growing, and Cody could feel it. "You're either with me or you're against me," Cody said, his voice rising. "So which is it?" Neither boy answered. The silence that followed was heavy, the weight of the question pressing down on everyone in the alley. Cody let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Figures. You're both a couple of cowards." Elon took a step forward, his presence calm but commanding. "They're not cowards," he said. "They're starting to see what you're too afraid to admit." "And what's that?" Cody shot back, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "That this isn't who you are," Elon said simply. Cody's fists clenched at his sides, his body taut with anger. He hated how calm this man was, how unbothered he seemed by the chaos around him. It made Cody feel small, powerless, and that only made him angrier. "You don't get to tell me who I am," he spat. "I'm not telling you," Elon replied. "I'm asking you to take a good look at yourself. Is this who you want to be?" Cody's face flushed with anger, the weight of the question hitting harder than he wanted to admit. But instead of answering, he grabbed one of Oliver's remaining notebooks and hurled it across the alley. The notebook hit the wall with a dull thud, its pages scattering like leaves in the wind. "There," Cody said, his voice rising. "You happy now?" Elon didn't flinch, his gaze steady. "Are you?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Even Marcus and Ethan seemed to pause, their unease growing as Cody's behavior spiraled further out of control. The onlookers at the edge of the alley exchanged murmurs, their curiosity tinged with discomfort. This wasn't just a case of kids being kids anymore. It was something darker. "You don't get it," Cody muttered, his voice low but venomous. "You don't know what it's like." "Then tell me," Elon said quietly. "Tell me what's so bad that it makes this okay." Cody froze, his jaw tightening as the weight of the question settled over him. For a moment, it looked like he might actually answer. But then he shook his head, his eyes narrowing. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," Elon said. Cody let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You think you're so smart. You think you've got all the answers. But you don't know anything." "Then help me understand," Elon said. "Because all I see right now is a kid who's better than this. And I think deep down, you know it too." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the murmurs from the onlookers had faded, the weight of the confrontation pressing down on everyone. Cody's fists trembled at his sides, his face a mask of anger and frustration. But behind the mask, there was something else, something fragile and uncertain. "You don't know me," Cody said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. And you never will. Elon didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at Oliver, who was still trembling in Marcus's grip. His wide eyes filled with fear. Then he looked back at Cody, his gaze steady. You're right. I don't know you, but I know that this isn't who you are. And the longer you keep pretending it is, the harder it's going to be to stop. Cody's jaw tightened, his body trembling with a mix of anger and something else. Something he couldn't quite name. But instead of backing down, he took a step forward, his eyes blazing with defiance. You don't get to decide who I am, he said, his voice rising. I do. The crowd at the edge of the alley had thickened, their quiet murmurs now a chorus of unease. A few had their phones out, cameras rolling, though no one dared step forward. Cody noticed them, his sharp gaze darting to the glowing screens every so often. But instead of deterring him, the attention seemed to fuel his rage. He thrived on being watched, on having his actions validated, even if only by the fear in others' eyes. But Elon's calm presence was an affront to that need, a mirror reflecting everything Cody wanted to ignore. You think you're so special, Cody spat, taking a step closer to Elon. You think standing there, acting all calm, makes you better than me? Elon didn't flinch. His hands remained in his pockets, his posture relaxed but deliberate. I don't think I'm better than you, he said evenly. But I do think you're better than this. Cody's face flushed with anger, his fists clenching at his sides. Stop saying that. You don't know me. I don't have to know you to see what's happening, Elon replied. You're trying to prove something, but the only person you're really fighting is yourself. Ethan and Marcus exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier confidence now completely eroded. Ethan took a half step back, his gaze flicking nervously to the crowd. Cody, maybe we should… Shut up, Cody barked, spinning on his heel to glare at Ethan. Don't start with me, man. Not now. Ethan recoiled, his shoulders hunching under the weight of Cody's anger. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his grip on Oliver's arm loosening yet again. The boy seized the moment, pulling away and scrambling to gather what little remained of his belongings. But Marcus quickly reached for him, his movements hesitant but firm. Let him go, Elon said, his tone sharp enough to make Marcus freeze. Marcus hesitated, his gaze darting to Cody for guidance. But Cody was too busy seething, his attention locked on Elon. You think you can just waltz in here and tell us what to do? Cody said, his voice rising. You're nobody, just some random guy who doesn't know when to keep his mouth shut. I'm someone who doesn't stand by and let people get hurt, Elon said, his voice calm but firm. That's all I need to be. The words hit like a punch, and for a moment, Cody looked genuinely stunned. But the surprise quickly gave way to anger, his pride refusing to let him back down. He grabbed one of Oliver's torn notebooks from the ground and waved it in the air. You think this kid is worth all this effort? He sneered. Look at him. He's nothing. Just a loser with a backpack full of trash. Oliver flinched at the words, his small frame trembling as he clutched his remaining belongings to his chest. The boy's wide eyes flicked to Elon, silently pleading for reassurance, for a sign that he wasn't as worthless as Cody claimed. Elon met his gaze briefly, offering a small nod before turning back to Cody. People aren't defined by what's in their backpack, Elon said. They're defined by what's in their heart. And from where I'm standing, that kid has more heart than you'll ever understand. The crowd murmured in agreement, a few heads nodding as the tension in the alley thickened. Cody noticed the shift, the way the onlookers were starting to side with Elon, and it made his blood boil. He felt the control slipping through his fingers, and he hated it. You think you're so smart, Cody said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You think you've got all the answers, but you don't know anything about me. Then tell me, Elon said, his tone even. Tell me why you're so angry. I'm not angry, Cody shouted, his voice echoing off the alley walls. I'm in control. Elon tilted his head slightly, his calm gaze unwavering. Is that what this is? Control? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're spiraling. The words hit harder than Cody wanted to admit, and his fists trembled at his sides. "You don't get to talk to me like that," he muttered, his voice low and venomous. "Then prove me wrong," Elon said. "Show me that you're in control. Walk away." Cody let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You don't get it, do you? Walking away isn't an option. Not for me." "Why not?" Elon asked. "What are you afraid of?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Cody's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the crowd of onlookers, then back to Elon. For a moment, it looked like he might actually answer. But then he shook his head, his pride refusing to let him show any vulnerability. "You wouldn't understand," Cody muttered. "Try me," Elon said. Cody's face twisted with anger, his body trembling as he clenched his fists. "You don't know anything about me, and you never will." Elon didn't respond, his calm gaze fixed on Cody as the tension in the alley reached a boiling point. Marcus and Ethan shifted nervously, their unease growing as they watched their leader unravel. "Cody, come on," Ethan said quietly. "This is getting out of hand." "It's not out of hand," Cody snapped, spinning to glare at him. "I'm in control here." Ethan flinched but didn't back down entirely. "You don't look like you're in control." Cody's face flushed with anger, his fists clenching tighter. "You're either with me or against me," he said, his voice trembling. "So which is it?" Neither Ethan nor Marcus answered. Their silence spoke volumes, and it only made Cody angrier. He turned back to Elon, his eyes blazing with defiance. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you're so smart." "It's not about winning," Elon said. "It's about doing what's right." "Right?" Cody repeated, his voice rising. "And who decides what's right? You?" "No," Elon said simply. "You do." The words hit like a slap, and Cody froze, his mind racing as he tried to process what Elon meant. But instead of answering, he grabbed one of Oliver's books from the ground and hurled it against the wall. The book hit with a loud thud, its pages scattering across the pavement. "There," Cody said, his voice shaking. "Is that right enough for you?" Elon didn't flinch, his calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos around him. "You're only proving my point," he said quietly. "And what point is that?" Cody shouted, his voice cracking. "That this isn't who you are," Elon said. "And the longer you keep pretending it is, the harder it's going to be to stop." Cody's fists trembled at his sides, his face a mask of anger and frustration. But behind the mask, there was something else, something fragile and uncertain. And Elon could see it, even if Cody couldn't. "You don't get to decide who I am," Cody said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I do." The tension in the alley was suffocating, the weight of the confrontation pressing down on everyone. The crowd of onlookers watched in silence, their eyes darting between Elon and Cody, unsure of what would happen next. Oliver clutched his belongings tightly, his small frame trembling as he looked up at Elon, silently pleading for the man to stay. And Elon stayed. He wasn't going anywhere. The silence in the alley was deafening, punctuated only by the murmurs of the growing crowd at its edge. Cody's breaths came in short, sharp bursts, his chest heaving as he glared at Elon. The cracks in his composure were widening, his facade of control crumbling with each passing moment. But Cody wasn't ready to give up. Not when so many eyes were on him, not when backing down felt like admitting defeat. "You think you're so much better than me," Cody spat, his voice trembling with anger. "But you're just like everyone else, sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, acting like you've got it all figured out." Elon didn't respond right away. Instead, he watched Cody carefully, his calm gaze unyielding. "This isn't about me," he said finally. "It's about you, and the choice you're about to make." Cody let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Choice? What choice? You think I've got options here?" "Everyone has options," Elon replied. "Even you." The words hung in the air, their weight pressing down on Cody like a lead blanket. But instead of breaking under it, he lashed out. He grabbed another of Oliver's notebooks from the ground, tearing it in half with a loud, satisfying rip. The sound echoed through the alley, a cruel punctuation mark to his anger. Oliver flinched, his wide eyes filling with tears as he clutched the remaining pieces of his belongings to his chest. He looked at Elon, silently pleading for help, but he didn't say a word. He couldn't. The fear had stolen his voice. "You think this kid is worth it?" Cody shouted, holding up the torn notebook for the crowd to see. "Look at him. He's nothing. Just another loser who's never gonna amount to anything." The crowd murmured uneasily, a few heads shaking in disapproval. But no one stepped forward, their reluctance to intervene palpable. It only made Cody more brazen, his voice rising as he fed off their silence. "You're all the same," Cody said, his gaze sweeping over the onlookers. "Standing there judging me like you're any better, but you're not. None of you are." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between Cody and Elon. "Cody, maybe we should—" "Don't," Cody snapped, cutting him off. "Don't even start with me right now." Marcus let out a nervous laugh, though it sounded forced. "Yeah, Ethan, just let him handle it." But even Marcus's voice lacked conviction, and Elon noticed the way his grip on Oliver had loosened completely. The boy was no longer restrained, but he didn't move, too scared to risk drawing Cody's attention back to him. "You're losing them," Elon said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Cody turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "What? They're starting to see you for who you really are," Elon continued, nodding toward Marcus and Ethan. "And so are you." Cody's jaw tightened, his fists trembling at his sides. "You don't know anything about me. I know that this isn't the person you want to be," Elon said. "And I know that deep down you're starting to realize that too." The words hit like a punch, and Cody's smirk faltered. But he quickly masked his uncertainty with a sharp laugh, shaking his head. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Like you've got all the answers." "I don't," Elon said simply. "But I've seen enough to know that this path you're on doesn't lead anywhere good." Cody let out a bitter laugh, his eyes blazing with defiance. "You don't get it, do you? Walking away isn't an option for me. Not now." "Why not?" Elon asked. "What are you afraid of?" Cody froze, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. For a moment, it looked like he might actually answer. But then he shook his head, his pride refusing to let him show any vulnerability. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered. "Try me," Elon said. Cody's fists clenched tighter, his body trembling as he glared at Elon. "You don't know anything about me, and you never will." Elon didn't flinch, his calm gaze locked on Cody as the tension in the alley continued to build. The crowd watched in silence, their unease growing as Cody's behavior became more erratic. "You don't get to tell me who I am," Cody said finally, his voice rising. "I do." "Then show us," Elon said quietly. "Show us who you really are." Cody's face flushed with anger, his fists trembling as he looked around the alley. His gaze landed on Oliver, who was still huddled against the wall, clutching his torn belongings. Cody let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You think I'm just gonna let this go?" he said, his voice rising. "You think I'm just gonna walk away?" "You can," Elon said, "and it'll be the best decision you've ever made." Cody's laughter grew louder, more bitter. "You don't get it, do you? I can't just walk away. Not now. Not ever." "Why not?" Elon asked again, his voice calm but firm. "What's stopping you?" Cody didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed one of Oliver's remaining notebooks and hurled it against the wall. The book hit with a loud thud, its pages scattering across the pavement. "There," Cody said, his voice shaking. "Is that good enough for you?" Elon didn't flinch, his calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos around him. "You're only proving my point," he said quietly. "And what point is that?" Cody shouted, his voice cracking. "That this isn't who you are," Elon said. "And the longer you keep pretending it is, the harder it's going to be to stop." Cody's fists trembled at his sides, his face a mask of anger and frustration. But behind the mask, there was something else, something fragile and uncertain. And Elon could see it, even if Cody couldn't. "You think you're so much better than me," Cody spat, his voice trembling with barely contained anger. "Standing there acting like you've got it all figured out. But you don't know anything about me." I know enough, Elon said, his tone calm but deliberate. I know that this isn't who you are. Stop saying that, Cody shouted, his voice echoing off the alley walls. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. Elon tilted his head slightly, his gaze steady. Then tell me. Help me understand. Cody let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. You wouldn't get it. Guys like you never do. Try me, Elon said. The words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Cody's fists trembled as he looked around the alley, his gaze darting to Marcus and Ethan. Both boys had gone silent, their earlier bravado replaced by a nervous energy that clung to them like a second skin. Marcus looked like he wanted to say something, but the words caught in his throat. Ethan shifted uneasily, his gaze darting to the crowd of onlookers before dropping to the ground. You're losing them, Elon said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Cody turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. What? They're starting to see you for who you really are, Elon continued. And so are you. Cody's jaw tightened, his face flushing with anger. You don't know anything about me, he muttered. And you don't get to talk to me like that. I'm not here to talk down to you, Elon said. I'm here to remind you that you have a choice. Cody let out another bitter laugh, though it sounded hollow this time. Choice? What choice? You think I can just walk away from this? After everything, you can, Elon said. It's not too late. Cody's fists clenched tighter, his body trembling with anger and something else. Something he couldn't quite name. But instead of backing down, he lashed out. He grabbed one of Oliver's remaining notebooks from the ground and tore it in half with a loud, satisfying rip. The sound echoed through the alley, a cruel punctuation mark to his frustration. Oliver flinched, his small frame trembling as he clutched the tattered remnants of his belongings to his chest. His wide eyes flicked to Elon, silently pleading for reassurance, for a sign that he wasn't as powerless as he felt. Elon met his gaze briefly, offering a small nod before turning back to Cody. This isn't going to make you feel better, Elon said, his tone even. It's not going to change anything. You don't know what you're talking about, Cody snapped, his voice rising. You think you can just stand there and fix everything with your stupid words? Well, guess what? It doesn't work like that. Then how does it work? Elon asked, his gaze steady. Hurting people? Making them feel small? Does that make you feel big? Cody froze, the question hitting harder than he wanted to admit. But instead of answering, he grabbed another of Oliver's belongings, a worn pencil case, and hurled it against the wall. The case hit with a dull thud, its contents spilling out across the pavement. There, Cody said, his voice shaking. Is that big enough for you? The crowd murmured uneasily, their discomfort growing as Cody's behavior became more erratic. A few of them exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of unease and pity. But no one stepped forward, their reluctance to intervene as palpable as the tension in the air. You're only proving my point, Elon said quietly. And what point is that? Cody shouted, his voice cracking. That I'm some kind of bad guy? That I'm the villain here? No, Elon said. That you're better than this. And deep down, you know it. Cody let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. Then tell me, Elon said. Tell me what's so bad that it makes this okay. Cody froze, his jaw tightening as the weight of the question settled over him. For a moment, it looked like he might actually answer. But then he shook his head, his pride refusing to let him show any vulnerability. You wouldn't understand, he muttered. Try me, Elon said. Cody's fists trembled, his body taut with frustration. He glanced at Marcus and Ethan, his gaze hard and unyielding. You're with me on this, right? Neither boy answered right away. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between Cody and Elon. Ethan looked down at his feet, his shoulders hunched under the weight of the confrontation. Well, Cody pressed, his voice rising. You're either with me or against me. So which is it? Ethan let out a nervous laugh, though it sounded forced. I mean, we're with you, Cody. Right, Marcus? Marcus nodded reluctantly, though his hesitation was obvious. Yeah, sure. Whatever you say. Cody's smirk returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. See? That's loyalty. Something you wouldn't understand. Elon raised an eyebrow. Is it loyalty? Or are they just scared of you? The question hung in the air, heavy and pointed. Marcus and Ethan exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort growing as Cody's behavior became more unhinged. The cracks in their unity were widening, and it was clear that Cody was starting to lose his grip. You don't get it, Cody muttered, his voice low but venomous. You don't know what it's like. Then tell me, Elon said quietly. Help me understand. Cody froze again, his jaw tightening as the weight of the question pressed down on him. But instead of answering, he turned back to Oliver, his smirk widening as he grabbed another of the boy's belongings, a crumpled drawing, and held it up for the crowd to see. Look at this, Cody said, his tone mocking. Is this supposed to be art? Looks more like garbage to me. Oliver's cheeks burned with shame, tears welling in his eyes as the bully's laughter echoed around him. He wanted to disappear, to shrink into the ground and never have to face them again. But then he saw Elon take another step forward, his calm presence a quiet but powerful reminder that he wasn't alone. That's enough, Elon said, his voice sharp and commanding. The bullies froze, their laughter dying down as they turned to face him. But Cody wasn't ready to back down. His pride wouldn't let him. Or what? Cody challenged, his voice trembling slightly. What are you gonna do about it? Elon's gaze didn't waver. You don't want to know. Cody thrived on the attention, or at least he pretended to. The weight of all those eyes felt like a spotlight he couldn't escape, but he couldn't let that show. Instead, he plastered on his usual smirk, his bravado masking the cracks in his composure. You think you're so smart, Cody said, his voice sharp and biting as he turned back to Elon. Standing there acting like you've got all the answers. But you don't know anything about me. I know you're angry, Elon said, his tone even. And I know that anger is driving you to do things you'll regret. Cody's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered, letting out a bitter laugh. Regret? You think I'm gonna regret this? No one's gonna remember this tomorrow. They will, Elon said simply, his gaze flicking to the crowd. And so will you. The statement landed harder than Cody wanted to admit. He glanced at the onlookers, their phones pointed squarely at him, and for a moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. But he quickly shook it off, his pride refusing to let him show any weakness. Yeah, well, let them watch, Cody said, his voice rising. Let them see what happens when someone thinks they can mess with me. Ethan shifted nervously, his gaze darting between Cody and the crowd. Cody, maybe we should just... Shut up, Ethan, Cody snapped, his sharp glare silencing the other boy. You don't get to tell me what to do. Marcus, standing a few steps away, shifted uneasily. His earlier confidence had all but evaporated, leaving behind a boy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. But he didn't say anything, his silence a sign of his reluctant loyalty. You're losing them, Elon said quietly, his calm tone cutting through the tension like a knife. Your friends, the crowd, yourself. Cody's jaw tightened, his fists trembling at his sides. You don't know anything about me, he muttered. And you don't get to tell me who I am. Elon took a small step forward, his movements deliberate but unthreatening. Then show me, he said. Show me who you really are. Cody froze, the challenge hanging in the air like a dare. For a moment, it looked like he might actually answer. But then he grabbed one of Oliver's drawings from the ground, holding it up with a mocking grin. Is this supposed to be art? Cody said, his voice dripping with disdain. Looks more like garbage to me. Oliver's face flushed with shame, his small frame trembling as tears welled in his eyes. He clutched his remaining belongings tightly, his gaze dropping to the ground. But before he could say anything, Elon spoke. Put it down, Elon said, his voice firm but calm. Cody turned to him, his smirk widening. Or what? You gonna come over here and make me? Elon's gaze didn't waver. I'm asking you to do the right thing. Yeah, well, maybe I don't care about the right thing, Cody shot back. Maybe I'm tired of people like you telling me how to live my life. This isn't living, Elon said simply. It's surviving. And you deserve better than that. The words hit like a punch, and for a moment, Cody's bravado cracked. But he quickly masked his uncertainty with a sharp laugh, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about me. It's about showing everyone that I'm not someone to mess with. No one's messing with you, Elon said. You're the one starting the fight. Cody's fists clenched tighter, his body trembling with anger and frustration. He turned to Marcus and Ethan, his sharp glare cutting through the tension. Are you with me or not? He demanded. Marcus hesitated, his gaze flicking to Elon before dropping to the ground. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his shoulders hunching under the weight of Cody's anger. Well, Cody pressed, his voice rising. Say something. Ethan let out a nervous laugh, though it sounded hollow. We're with you, Cody. Right, Marcus? Marcus nodded reluctantly, though his hesitation was obvious. Yeah, sure. Whatever you say. Cody's smirk returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. See? That's loyalty. It's fear, Elon corrected. And it's not the same thing. Cody's face flushed with anger, his fists trembling as he turned back to Elon. You don't get to talk to me like that, he muttered. You don't know anything about me. Then help me understand, Elon said. Tell me what's driving you to do this. Cody froze again, his jaw tightening as the weight of the question pressed down on him. But instead of answering, he grabbed another of Oliver's belongings, a small, tattered sketchbook, and held it up for the crowd to see. Look at this, Cody said, his tone mocking. Is this supposed to be important? Looks like junk to me. Oliver's cheeks burned with shame, tears streaming down his face as Cody flipped through the sketchbook, tearing out pages and scattering them on the ground. The boy's small frame shook with silent sobs, his hands trembling as he reached for the torn pages. Stop, Oliver whispered, his voice cracking. Please, just stop. Cody ignored him, his smirk widening as he tossed the sketchbook onto the ground. What are you gonna do about it, huh? Elon took another step forward, his calm presence a quiet but powerful counterpoint to Cody's escalating cruelty. You've made your point, he said. Now it's time to stop. The crowd murmured uneasily, their discomfort growing as Cody's behavior spiraled further out of control. A few of them exchanged glances, their unease mirrored in their expressions. But no one stepped forward, their silence a testament to their reluctance to get involved. You don't get to tell me what to do, Cody said, his voice rising. You don't get to stand there and act like you're better than me. I'm not better than you, Elon said. But I am asking you to be better than this. Cody's fists trembled at his sides, his face a mask of anger and frustration. But behind the mask, there was something else, something fragile and uncertain. And Elon could see it, even if Cody couldn't. Oliver's shoulders shook with silent sobs, his small hands hovering uselessly over the remnants of his possessions. He wanted to stop Cody, to grab what little was left and run, but his legs felt rooted to the ground. Fear paralyzed him, the tears streaming down his face blurring the world around him. Elon stood just a few feet away, his calm gaze fixed on Cody. His hands were still in his pockets, his posture relaxed but deliberate, as though he were waiting for the right moment to step in. The crowd at the edge of the alley had grown silent, their earlier murmurs replaced by a heavy, uneasy quiet. Phones were still raised, cameras capturing every second, but no one moved. No one dared. You're pathetic, Cody said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. He pointed at Oliver, his smirk widening. Crying over some stupid papers? What, did your mommy make these for you? Oh, wait. You probably don't even have a mommy, do you? The words hit harder than the torn papers ever could. Oliver flinched as though he'd been struck, his face crumpling under the weight of Cody's cruelty. A fresh wave of tears spilled down his cheeks, and he hugged his knees to his chest, trying to make himself as small as possible. Enough, Elon said, his voice sharp and commanding. Cody turned to face him, his smirk faltering for a fraction of a second before he forced it back into place. Or what, he said, his voice rising. You gonna lecture me again? Tell me how I'm better than this. You are better than this, Elon said evenly. But you're so caught up in trying to prove something that you can't see it. Cody let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about being better. It's about being in control. Something you wouldn't understand. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between Cody and Elon. Cody, maybe we should just, call it a day. This is getting... Shut up, Ethan. Cody snapped, his sharp glare silencing the other boy. Don't start with me right now. Marcus looked equally uneasy, his earlier confidence completely eroded. He glanced at Oliver, then at Elon, as though trying to decide which direction offered the safest escape. But he stayed silent, his loyalty to Cody outweighing his growing discomfort. You're losing them, Elon said quietly, his tone calm but firm. Your friends, the crowd, yourself. Cody's jaw tightened, his fists trembling at his sides. You don't know anything about me, he muttered. And you don't get to tell me who I am. I'm not here to tell you who you are, Elon said. I'm here to remind you that you have a choice. Choice, Cody repeated, his voice rising. What choice? You think I can just walk away from this? After everything, you can, Elon said. And it'll be the best decision you've ever made. Cody's laughter was sharp and bitter, cutting through the tension like glass. You think this is about me? This is about showing everyone that I'm not someone to mess with, that I'm the one in control. No one's messing with you, Elon said. You're the one starting the fight. The words hit like a punch, and for a moment, Cody's bravado cracked. But he quickly masked his uncertainty with a sharp laugh, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about what you think it's about. It's about making sure no one forgets who's in charge. Control doesn't come from fear, Elon said. It comes from respect. And right now, all you're doing is losing it. Cody's fists clenched tighter, his face flushing with anger. You think you're so smart, he said, his voice trembling. Standing there, acting all calm, like you've got it all figured out. But you don't know anything about me. Then tell me, Elon said. Tell me what's driving you to do this. Cody froze, his jaw tightening as the weight of the question pressed down on him. For a moment, it looked like he might actually answer. But then he grabbed one of Oliver's torn drawings from the ground and held it up for the crowd to see. Is this supposed to mean something? Cody sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Looks like garbage to me. Oliver let out a small, choked sob, his hands trembling as he reached for the drawing. But Cody didn't let him have it. Instead, he crumpled it into a ball and tossed it into the gutter, his smirk widening as the crowd murmured uneasily. That's enough, Elon said, his voice sharper this time. Cody turned to him, his smirk faltering for a moment before he forced it back into place. Or what? He said, his voice rising. What are you going to do about it? Elon took a slow step forward, his gaze locked on Cody. I don't have to do anything, he said quietly. You're doing it to yourself. The statement landed harder than Cody expected, and for a moment, he looked genuinely stunned. But the surprise quickly gave way to anger, his pride refusing to let him back down. He grabbed another of Oliver's belongings, a small, laminated certificate, and held it up with a mocking grin. Look at this, Cody said, his tone mocking. Participation award? Wow, you must be so proud. Oliver flinched, his face crumpling as fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. He didn't say anything, his small frame trembling as he clutched his knees to his chest. Elon's gaze didn't waver. You've made your point, he said. Now it's time to stop. Cody let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You think you're in charge here? You think you can just tell me what to do? I'm not in charge, Elon said. But neither are you. The words hit like a slap, and Cody froze, his smirk slipping as the weight of Elon's statement pressed down on him. But instead of backing down, he lashed out, grabbing another of Oliver's belongings and hurling it against the wall. The sound of shattering plastic filled the alley, a cruel punctuation mark to Cody's frustration. The crowd murmured uneasily, their discomfort growing as Cody's behavior became more erratic. A few exchanged glances, their unease mirrored in their expressions. But no one stepped forward. their silence a testament to their reluctance to get involved. "You don't get to tell me who I am," Cody said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I decide that." Elon didn't respond right away. Instead, he watched Cody carefully, his calm gaze unwavering. "Then decide," he said quietly, "and make it the right choice." The sound of Cody's laughter ricocheted off the alley walls, sharp and jagged, a cruel melody that seemed to hang in the heavy air. His eyes darted to the growing crowd at the mouth of the alley, the attention feeding his desperation to maintain control. The phones pointed at him felt like weapons now, their cameras capturing every movement, every word. But Cody refused to let the weight of their judgment show. "You think this is gonna stop me?" Cody shouted, his voice rising as he turned to Elon. "You think a bunch of nosy people with phones are gonna make me back down?" Elon's calm gaze met Cody's fiery one, unwavering and steady. "They're not here to stop you," Elon said evenly. "You're stopping yourself." The words hit like a punch, and for a moment, Cody froze, his bravado cracking under the weight of the statement. But he quickly masked his uncertainty with a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about stopping. This is about proving a point." "And what point is that?" Elon asked, his tone calm but pointed. Cody's smirk widened, though it didn't reach his eyes. "That I'm in charge. That no one gets to mess with me." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between Cody and Elon. "Cody, maybe we should just, walk away. This is getting—" "Shut up, Ethan," Cody snapped, his sharp glare silencing the other boy. "You don't get to tell me what to do." Marcus glanced at Ethan, then back at Cody, his discomfort etched clearly on his face. "Yeah, but maybe he's right. This is getting kinda out of hand." Cody rounded on Marcus, his eyes blazing with anger. "Out of hand? You think this is out of hand? I've got this under control." Marcus didn't respond, his silence speaking louder than words. Cody's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before he turned back to Elon, his fists trembling at his sides. "You think you've won, don't you?" Cody said, his voice rising. "You think you've got me all figured out?" "It's not about winning," Elon said simply. "It's about doing what's right." "And who decides what's right?" Cody shot back. "You?" "No," Elon said. "You do." The words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Cody's fists clenched tighter, his body trembling as he struggled to hold onto his crumbling composure. He turned to Oliver, who was still huddled against the wall, his small frame trembling as he clutched the remains of his belongings. "You think this kid matters?" Cody sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Look at him. He's nothing. Just another loser who's never gonna amount to anything." Oliver flinched at the words, his face crumpling under the weight of Cody's cruelty. Tears streamed down his cheeks, and he hugged his knees to his chest, trying to make himself as small as possible. "That's enough," Elon said, his voice sharp and commanding. Cody turned to him, his smirk widening. "Or what? You gonna lecture me again? Tell me how I'm better than this." "You are better than this," Elon said evenly. "But you're so caught up in trying to prove something that you can't see it." Cody let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about being better. It's about being in control." "You're not in control," Elon said. "You're losing it." The statement landed harder than Cody expected, and for a moment, he looked genuinely stunned. But the surprise quickly gave way to anger, his pride refusing to let him back down. He grabbed one of Oliver's drawings from the ground and held it up for the crowd to see. "Is this supposed to mean something?" Cody sneered, his voice mocking. "Looks like garbage to me." The crowd murmured uneasily, their discomfort mirrored in their expressions. A few exchanged glances, their unease growing as Cody's behavior became more erratic. But no one stepped forward, their silence a testament to their reluctance to get involved. Oliver's cheeks burned with shame, his hands trembling as he reached for the drawing. But Cody didn't let him have it. Instead, he crumpled it into a ball and tossed it onto the ground, his smirk widening as the crowd watched in silence. "Stop," Oliver whispered, his voice cracking. "Please, Just stop. Cody ignored him, his attention fixed on Elon. You're not gonna stop me, he said, his voice rising. You can't. I'm not here to stop you, Elon said. I'm here to remind you that you have a choice. Cody's fists trembled, his body taut with frustration. He glanced at Marcus and Ethan, his sharp glare cutting through the tension. You're with me on this, right? Neither boy answered right away. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting to Elon before dropping to the ground. Ethan let out a nervous laugh, though it sounded forced. Yeah, sure, Marcus muttered, though his hesitation was obvious. See, Cody said, his smirk returning. That's loyalty. It's fear, Elon corrected. And it's not the same thing. Cody's face flushed with anger, his fists trembling as he turned back to Elon. You don't get to talk to me like that, he muttered. You don't know anything about me. Then tell me, Elon said. Tell me what's driving you to do this. Cody froze, his jaw tightening as the weight of the question pressed down on him. For a moment, it looked like he might actually answer. But then he grabbed another of Oliver's belongings, a small, tattered sketchbook, and held it up with a mocking grin. Look at this, Cody said, his tone dripping with disdain. Is this supposed to be important? Looks like junk to me. Oliver let out a small, choked sob, his hands trembling as he reached for the sketchbook. But Cody didn't let him have it. Instead, he tore it in half, the sound of ripping paper echoing through the alley. That's enough, Elon said, his voice sharper this time. Cody turned to him, his smirk faltering for a moment before he forced it back into place. Or what, he said, his voice rising. What are you gonna do about it? Elon didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a slow step forward, his calm presence filling the alley. You've already done enough, he said quietly. The sound of ripping paper lingered in the air like a wound that wouldn't heal. Cody's smirk faltered as the weight of his actions began to settle in the silence that followed. The crowd at the mouth of the alley, once passive observers, now murmured in growing discontent. Phones were still pointed at him, recording every movement, every word. Cody's bravado, which had carried him this far, started to waver under the pressure of so many eyes. Ethan shifted nervously beside him, his gaze darting between Cody and Elon. Cody, he said quietly, his voice tinged with unease. Maybe we should. I don't want to hear it. Cody snapped, rounding on him with a glare that could cut steel. Don't you start with me too. Marcus took a small step back, his discomfort written plainly across his face. He exchanged a look with Ethan, and for the first time, a fissure appeared in their unity. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, their judgment palpable even in their silence. You've made your point, Elon said, his voice calm but firm. Now it's time to stop. Cody turned back to him, his fists clenching at his sides. You don't get to tell me what to do, he muttered, his voice trembling with barely contained anger. I'm not telling you what to do, Elon said. I'm asking you to think about what happens next. The statement landed like a stone in a still pond, sending ripples through the tension in the alley. Cody's eyes darted to the crowd, then back to Elon. His jaw tightened as he struggled to hold onto the last shreds of his bravado. You think you're so much better than me, Cody said, his voice rising, standing there acting like you've got it all figured out. But you don't know anything about me. I know enough, Elon said simply, and I know that this isn't who you are. Stop saying that, Cody shouted, his voice echoing off the alley walls. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. Then tell me, Elon said. Help me understand. Cody froze, his fists trembling as the weight of the question pressed down on him. For a moment, it looked like he might actually answer. But then he shook his head, his pride refusing to let him show any vulnerability. You wouldn't understand, Cody muttered, his voice low and venomous. Try me, Elon said, his tone even. Before Cody could respond, a voice from the crowd broke through the tension. You've gone too far, man, someone called out. Just let the kid go. Cody's head snapped around, his eyes narrowing as he searched for the source of the voice. The crowd shifted uneasily, their discomfort growing as Cody's attention turned toward them. Who said that? Cody demanded, his voice rising. Huh? Who thinks they can tell me what to do? The onlookers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one stepped forward. Cody let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. That's what I thought. Cowards. All of you. They're not cowards, Elon said quietly. They're just tired of watching you hurt people. Cody turned back to him, his smirk returning, though it didn't reach his eyes. You think you're so smart, he said. You think you've got all the answers. But you don't know anything about me. I know that you're better than this, Elon said. And I think you know it too. The words hit like a punch, and for a moment, Cody's bravado cracked. But he quickly masked his uncertainty with a sharp laugh, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about being better. This is about being in control. You're not in control, Elon said. You're losing it, the crowd murmured in agreement, their quiet voices a chorus of disapproval. Cody noticed the shift, the way the onlookers were starting to turn against him, and it made his blood boil. He felt the control slipping through his fingers, and he hated it. You think you can stand there and judge me? Cody shouted, his voice rising. You think you're better than me? Well, guess what? You're not. No one's judging you, Elon said, but people are watching, and they're seeing who you really are. Cody's face flushed with anger, his fists clenching tighter. He turned to Marcus and Ethan, his sharp glare cutting through the tension. You're with me on this, right? Marcus hesitated, his gaze darting to the ground. I don't know, man, he muttered. This is getting... I don't know. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his shoulders hunching under the weight of Cody's anger. Yeah, Cody, he said quietly. Maybe we should just, walk away. Cody's smirk twisted into a sneer as he looked at his friends. Walk away? Is that what you want to do? Leave me here to deal with this on my own. Neither boy answered, their silence speaking louder than words. Cody let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking his head. Figures. Cowards. Both of you. It's not cowardice, Elon said. It's realizing that this isn't the right path. And it's not too late for you to do the same. Cody turned to him, his smirk faltering. You don't get it, do you? I can't just walk away. Not now. You can, Elon said. It's never too late to do the right thing. Cody froze, his fists trembling as the weight of Elon's words pressed down on him. The crowd watched in silence, their eyes darting between the two men. Oliver clutched his belongings tightly, his small frame trembling as he looked up at Elon, silently pleading for the man to stay. You think you've got me all figured out, Cody muttered, his voice low but venomous. You think you're better than me. I don't think I'm better than you, Elon said evenly. But I do think you're better than this. Stop saying that, Cody shouted, his voice cracking as it echoed off the alley walls. You don't know anything about me. Then tell me, Elon said, his tone calm but firm. Help me understand. Cody's jaw tightened, his gaze darting to the crowd and then back to Elon. The onlookers were no longer silent. Their murmurs had grown louder, a quiet but persistent chorus of disapproval. Phones were still raised, recording every moment, and Cody could feel their judgment pressing down on him like a heavy weight. Ethan took a step back, his gaze flicking nervously between Cody and the crowd. Cody, he said quietly, his voice tinged with unease. Maybe we should just, leave. This isn't worth it. Shut up, Ethan, Cody snapped, rounding on him with a glare that could cut steel. Don't start with me right now. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his discomfort etched plainly on his face. Yeah, but maybe he's right, he muttered. This is getting out of hand. Out of hand. Cody repeated, his voice rising. You think this is out of hand? I'm in control here. Marcus didn't respond, his silence speaking louder than words. Cody let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking his head. Figures, he muttered. You're just like everyone else. You're losing them, Elon said quietly, his calm tone cutting through the tension like a knife. Your friends, the crowd, yourself. The words hit like a punch, and for a moment, Cody froze, his bravado cracking under the weight of the statement. But instead of backing down, he lashed out. He turned to Oliver, who was still huddled against the wall, his small frame trembling as he clutched the remains of his belongings. "You think this kid matters?" Cody sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Look at him. He's nothing. Just another loser who's never gonna amount to anything." Oliver flinched at the words, his face crumpling under the weight of Cody's cruelty. Tears streamed down his cheeks, and he hugged his knees to his chest, trying to make himself as small as possible. "Enough," Elon said, his voice sharp and commanding. Cody turned to him, his smirk faltering for a moment before he forced it back into place. "Or what?" he said, his voice rising. "What are you gonna do about it?" "I'm not here to fight you," Elon said. "I'm here to remind you that you have a choice." "Choice?" Cody repeated, his voice bitter. "What choice? You think I can just walk away from this? After everything, you can," Elon said simply, "and it'll be the best decision you've ever made." Cody's laughter was sharp and bitter, cutting through the tension like glass. "You think this is about me?" he shouted. "This is about showing everyone that I'm not someone to mess with." "No one's messing with you," Elon said. "You're the one starting the fight." Cody's fists clenched tighter, his body trembling with anger and frustration. He glanced at Marcus and Ethan, his sharp glare cutting through the tension. "You're with me on this, right?" Neither boy answered right away. Marcus hesitated, his gaze darting to Elon before dropping to the ground. Ethan let out a nervous laugh, though it sounded forced. "Yeah, sure," Marcus muttered, though his hesitation was obvious. "See," Cody said, his smirk returning. "That's loyalty." "It's fear," Elon corrected. "And it's not the same thing." The statement landed harder than Cody wanted to admit, and for a moment, he looked genuinely stunned. But the surprise quickly gave way to anger, his pride refusing to let him back down. He grabbed another of Oliver's belongings, a small, laminated certificate, and held it up with a mocking grin. "Look at this," Cody said, his tone mocking. "Participation award? Wow, you must be so proud." Oliver flinched, his face crumpling as fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. He didn't say anything, his small frame trembling as he clutched his knees to his chest. Elon took another step forward, his calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos around him. "You've made your point," he said quietly. "Now it's time to stop." Cody's smirk faltered again, the cracks in his facade widening as the reality of the situation began to dawn on him. The crowd was against him. His friends were abandoning him. And Elon was standing firm, unshaken and unyielding. But Cody's pride wouldn't let him back down completely. Not yet. He turned to Elon, his fists trembling at his sides. "You think you're so much better than me," he muttered, his voice low and venomous. "But you're just like everyone else." "I'm not better than you," Elon said. "But I do know that this isn't who you want to be." "Stop saying that," Cody shouted, his voice cracking as it echoed off the alley walls. "You don't know me. You don't know anything about me." Cody's breathing was shallow and quick, his chest rising and falling as he paced back and forth in the narrow alley. The crowd at the edge had swelled even more, their murmurs an oppressive soundtrack to the unfolding drama. Cody's eyes darted between the onlookers, their phones capturing every moment, and Elon, whose calm and steady presence seemed to cut through the tension like a knife. "You think you've won?" Cody spat, his voice trembling with anger. "You think standing there, all smug and quiet, makes you better than me?" "I'm not here to win," Elon said evenly. "I'm here to make sure that boy is safe." Cody's smirk twisted into something more feral, a mask of bravado barely concealing the cracks in his composure. "Safe," he sneered. "From what? Words? A couple of torn-up papers? You're acting like I'm some kind of monster." "No one called you a monster," Elon said. "But your actions are speaking louder than you realize." The statement landed like a blow, and for a moment, Cody's bravado faltered. But instead of stepping back, he pushed forward, his desperation to reassert control driving him to even greater cruelty. He grabbed one of Oliver's torn drawings from the ground, the crumpled paper smudged with dirt and tears. "Look at this," Cody said, holding it up for the crowd to see. This is what you're fighting for? This stupid piece of garbage? Oliver flinched, his small hands clutching the remains of his belongings to his chest. Tears streaked his face, but he didn't say a word. He couldn't find the strength to speak. "Stop it," Elon said, his voice sharp and commanding. "Or what?" Cody challenged, his eyes blazing with defiance. "You gonna come over here and take it from me?" Elon took a step forward, his movements deliberate and unthreatening. "I don't have to take anything from you," he said. "You're already losing more than you realize." The crowd murmured in agreement, their quiet disapproval growing louder as Cody's behavior became more erratic. A few onlookers exchanged glances, their unease mirrored in their expressions. But no one stepped forward, their reluctance to intervene a stark contrast to Elon's unwavering presence. "You don't get to decide what I lose," Cody said, his voice rising. "You don't get to stand there and act like you're better than me." "I'm not better than you," Elon said. "But I do know that this isn't who you want to be." "Stop saying that," Cody shouted, his voice cracking. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through." "Then tell me," Elon said quietly. "Help me understand." Cody froze, his fists trembling at his sides as the weight of the question pressed down on him. For a moment, it looked like he might actually answer. But then he shook his head, his pride refusing to let him show any vulnerability. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered, his voice low but venomous. "Try me," Elon said. Cody let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You think you're so smart," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Standing there, acting all calm, like you've got it all figured out. But you don't know anything about me." "You're right," Elon said. "I don't know you, but I know enough to see that you're better than this." The words hit harder than Cody wanted to admit, and for a moment, he looked genuinely stunned. But he quickly masked his uncertainty with a sharp laugh, shaking his head. "Better? You think I'm better than this?" "I know you are," Elon said. "And deep down, I think you know it too." Cody's fists clenched tighter, his body trembling with anger and frustration. He glanced at Marcus and Ethan, his sharp glare cutting through the tension. "You're with me on this, right?" he demanded. Marcus hesitated, his gaze darting to the ground. "I don't know, man," he muttered. "This is getting... I don't know." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his shoulders hunching under the weight of Cody's anger. "Yeah, Cody," he said quietly. "Maybe we should just, stop." "Stop," Cody repeated, his voice rising. "You want me to stop? After everything?" "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's time." Cody's smirk twisted into a sneer as he looked at his friends. "Figures," he muttered. "You're just like everyone else. Weak." "It's not weakness to know when to stop," Elon said. "It's strength." "You don't get to talk to me about strength," Cody shouted, his voice cracking. "You don't know anything about what it takes to survive out here." "No," Elon said simply, "but I do know that surviving isn't the same as living. And what you're doing right now, that's not living." The words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Cody's fists trembled, his body taut with frustration and something else. Something he couldn't quite name. He glanced at the crowd, at Marcus and Ethan, at Elon, and then back at Oliver, who was still huddled against the wall, his small frame trembling. "You think this is over?" Cody muttered, his voice low and venomous. "It's not over." "Then make it over," Elon said. "You have the power to end this." Oliver, still huddled against the wall, clutched the remains of his belongings tightly. His tear-streaked face turned upward, his wide eyes locked on Elon as though the man's calm presence alone was enough to keep him safe. Elon glanced at the boy, offering a small, reassuring nod before turning back to Cody. "You can make this right," Elon said, his voice steady but firm. "It's not too late." Cody let out a bitter laugh, though it lacked the sharpness it had carried before. "Make it right? After everything I've done? You think I can just fix this?" "No," Elon said, "but you can start." Cody froze, the weight of Elon's words pressing down on him. The crowd watched in silence, their earlier judgment giving way to quiet anticipation. Even Marcus and Ethan had gone still, their eyes fixed on Cody as though waiting to see what he would do next. For a long moment, Cody said nothing. Then, slowly, he bent down and picked up one of the torn drawings from the ground. He held it in his hands, his gaze lingering on the crumpled paper as though seeing it for the first time. The smirk that had been his armor for so long was gone, replaced by an expression that was equal parts confusion and regret. I didn't mean to," Cody started, his voice trailing off. He looked up at Oliver, his eyes wide and uncertain. I don't know why I did it." Oliver didn't respond, his small frame trembling as he clutched his belongings. But his eyes, still filled with tears, softened slightly at Cody's unexpected admission. "It's not about why you did it," Elon said, his voice quiet but firm. "It's about what you do now." Cody looked at him, his expression a mix of anger, frustration, and something dangerously close to hope. For the first time, he seemed to truly hear Elon's words, the weight of them sinking in as he stood there, holding the torn drawing in his hands. The crowd murmured softly, their unease giving way to something closer to curiosity. A few onlookers lowered their phones, their attention shifting from recording the scene to simply witnessing it. The shift wasn't lost on Cody, and he glanced at the crowd, his gaze lingering on their faces as though searching for something. Understanding, forgiveness, or maybe just a way out. "You can't undo what's been done," Elon said, taking a small step forward. "But you can choose to do better. Starting now." Cody hesitated, his fists trembling as he looked back at the drawing in his hands. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he took a step toward Oliver. The boy flinched, his wide eyes locking on Cody as though bracing for another act of cruelty. But Cody didn't lash out. Instead, he knelt down and held out the torn drawing, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm sorry," Cody said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to. I'm sorry." Oliver stared at him, his small hands clutching his belongings tightly. For a moment, it looked like he might not take the drawing. But then, slowly, he reached out and took it, his fingers brushing against Cody's as he did. "Thank you," Oliver whispered, his voice trembling. Cody nodded, his expression softening as he looked at the boy. I'll fix it. Promise." The crowd murmured softly, their earlier judgment giving way to quiet approval. A few onlookers clapped, the sound hesitant at first but quickly growing in confidence. Marcus and Ethan exchanged glances, their earlier discomfort replaced by something closer to relief. "You did the right thing," Elon said quietly, his calm gaze fixed on Cody. "And that's what matters." Cody looked at him, his expression a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. I don't know what to do now." "You start by being better," Elon said simply. "One choice at a time." Cody nodded, his fists unclenching at his sides. He turned to Marcus and Ethan, his gaze lingering on them for a moment before he spoke. "Let's go." Marcus and Ethan exchanged glances, their earlier hesitation replaced by quiet agreement. They nodded and followed Cody as he turned and walked away, their footsteps echoing softly in the alley. The crowd slowly began to disperse, their murmurs fading into the night as they left the alley. Oliver stood silently, clutching his belongings tightly as he looked up at Elon. His wide eyes were filled with gratitude, his small frame trembling slightly as the weight of the confrontation finally began to lift. "Are you okay?" Elon asked, his voice gentle. Oliver nodded, his grip on his belongings tightening. "I think so," he said quietly. "Thank you." Elon smiled, his calm presence a quiet reassurance. "You're braver than you think," he said. "Don't forget that." Oliver nodded again, his small hands clutching the torn drawing as he looked up at Elon. "I won't." Elon watched as the boy walked away, his small figure disappearing into the night. The alley was quiet now, the tension that had filled it replaced by a peaceful stillness. Elon took a deep breath, his gaze lingering on the empty space where the confrontation had unfolded. The lessons of the night were clear, etched into the quiet air like a reminder of what could happen when people stood up for what was right. The power of kindness, the strength of choice, and the courage to face oneself. All of it had played out in the small alley, witnessed by a crowd that would carry the story with them. Elon turned and walked away, his steps steady and deliberate. The night was far from over, but for now there was peace. What a powerful moment. Watching this story unfold reminds us of something so simple, yet so profound, that the choices we make every day define the kind of people we are. Cody's journey wasn't just about the cruelty he showed, but about the opportunity to change and grow. How often do we get the chance to reflect on our own actions and ask ourselves, are we doing what's right, or are we letting pride, fear, or insecurity guide us? Elon Musk didn't just stand up to a bully tonight. He stood as a symbol of calm in the storm, proving that real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about lifting them up, even when they don't think they deserve it. The way he handled Cody's anger, not by escalating it, but by diffusing it, speaks to the power of patience and understanding. Imagine if we all approached conflict with the same level of empathy and calm. How different would the world look? And then there's Oliver, the young boy who, despite being scared, never stopped holding on to hope. He's a reminder that resilience doesn't have to be loud or flashy. It can be as quiet as holding on to what matters most, even when the odds seem stacked against you. In the end, his bravery and Elon's unwavering presence made the impossible happen. They reached Cody, even when it seemed like no one could. But here's the real question for all of us watching. How would we have reacted? Would we have stood in Elon's place, speaking up for someone who couldn't defend themselves? Or would we have been part of the silent crowd, watching but not acting? This story challenges us to be better, to be the ones who step in when it matters most. So what about you? Have you ever faced a moment where standing up for someone felt hard, maybe even risky? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. Let's take this story and turn it into a conversation about kindness, courage, and the power of choice. Together, we can make these lessons a reality in our own lives.